A Mortal's Journey to Immortality Episode 331. In the previous episode, Han Li stunned the gathered cultivators when a single blue flame bird effortlessly shattered eccentric Jin's most powerful sword technique. What began as a seemingly simple exchange quickly escalated into a dazzling clash of elemental might, golden sword threads woven into a massive net, only to be frozen solid by a blooming lotus of celestial ice. With lightning-wreathed wings and flawless precision, Han Li subdued eccentric Jin in an instant, claiming victory without ever drawing a magic treasure of his own. As the cultivators looked on in awe, the balance of power across the Dreamcloud Mountains quietly shifted. Admiration, fear, and ambition stirred among the sects, but for Han Li, this triumph marked only another step along a much longer path. At the end of the previous episode, Senior Martial Brother Cheng, fulfilled at last by their sect's rise, revealed his intention to pass away in meditation, and offered the position of Grand Elder to Han Li. What will happen next? Stay tuned. And the story continues. Grand Elder? When Han Li heard him, he was dumbstruck. That's right, Senior Martial Brother Cheng said with a beaming smile. I will not hide this from Junior Martial Brother Han. When you were only at the early nascent soul stage, I had planned to appoint Junior Martial Brother Lu as the Grand Elder and have you support him. But now that you have entered the mid-nascent soul stage and displayed such astonishing abilities, earning great honor for the sect, this title rightfully belongs to you. Han Li stood in silence for a brief moment. He could see the sincerity in both men, but that did little to change the heaviness he felt. Senior Martial Brother Cheng continued to look at him with hopeful eyes, while Lu Luo wore a wry and helpless smile, as if already expecting Han Li's refusal. Then Han Li finally spoke. His tone was calm but firm. Many thanks for Senior Martial Brother's good intentions, but I cannot accept the role of Grand Elder. Lu Luo let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. Junior Martial Brother Han, there is no need to be so modest. You have already fulfilled the responsibilities of Grand Elder in everything except name. You cannot possibly expect an early nascent soul cultivator like me to hold such a position in the #1 sect of the state of Shi. But Han Li shook his head again. It is not modesty, I am simply unwilling. I am a cultivator who wishes for as few distractions as possible. If I am to pursue the path of cultivation wholeheartedly, I cannot carry the weight of leading the sect. In the future, I will enter long periods of secluded cultivation. I will be too preoccupied to handle affairs. And most importantly, I only joined the sect recently. I barely know the disciples, not even the core formation martial nephews. I simply lack the foundation to take this seat. I am fine as an ordinary elder, but the position of Grand Elder should belong to Senior Martial Brother Lu. The two Senior Martial Brothers exchanged a worried glance. They had anticipated some reluctance, but not such unyielding determination. Senior Martial Brother Cheng opened his mouth again, preparing to persuade him further, but Han Li's expression suddenly hardened. If you pursue this matter any further, he said sharply, you will force me to leave the Drifting Cloud sect. The air immediately tightened. The threat was not shouted, but the weight behind it left no room for doubt. Seeing Han Li's unwavering stance, Senior Martial Brother Cheng could only sigh and lower his head. Very well, since Brother Han has spoken so decisively, we will save this matter for another time. Han Li's expression softened once more. Although I will not accept the title, I will still protect the sect as an elder. If nothing unexpected happens, I will do everything in my power to ensure the sect prospers for the next 1,000 years. Hearing this, the two men finally allowed themselves a faint smile. They could not force him, and in truth, his promise alone was worth more than any title. With the tension eased, they shifted the topic to Master Sunreach's message. Han Li shared what he had learned, the strange connection between the 7 Spirit Islands, the massive whirlpool, and a mysterious event that had alarmed the greatest cultivators of the region. The two Senior Martial Brothers listened carefully, but they had little to add. Their sect had already sent disciples to investigate the rumors, and the results matched what the world had already heard. Nothing new, nothing hidden. Han Li nodded, though his heart remained heavy. The uncertainties surrounding the sea region weighed on him, but if Master Sunreach had spoken true, Then the divine devilbane lightning he possessed would protect him from most dangers. Still, Lu Luo reminded him with concern. Junior Martial Brother Han, given that all three great cultivators of the region are meeting, this matter must be extraordinary. Han Li smiled faintly. Do not worry, they will not make things difficult. And besides, even they should hesitate before offending someone who has reached the mid-nascent soul stage at my age. Lu Luo chuckled. That much is true. Their conversation gradually faded, and eventually the three of them made their way back to the Drifting Cloud sect. The two senior Martial brothers separated from Han Li, heading directly to the sect hall, gathering the important disciples to announce that the Drifting Cloud sect was now the #1 sect in the Dreamcloud Mountains. Discussions on restructuring and future plans began immediately. Han Li, however, went elsewhere. He traveled to the restricted area where Nangong Wan was sealed. There, he spent several hours using a secret technique that exhausted both his spiritual strength and his emotions. He examined the state of her soul under the Soul Seal Curse, searching desperately for hope. The results were mixed. The core of the ancient fire toad was weakening the curse, just as he had hoped, but the effect was far weaker than expected. It was difficult to say whether it would fully dissolve the soul seal. At best, it might grant him more time. At worst, it might fail entirely. Han Li left the chamber with a tired expression. Though his resolve remained untouched, he flew back to his cave residence and sealed himself within a secluded room. There, he forced himself to push aside all thoughts of Nangong Wan. Any distraction could lead to disaster while cultivating. Once his mind was finally settled, he began the process of refining the last strand of celestial ice flames he needed to control the Heaven Void Cauldron. He sat cross-legged, motionless, for an unknown length of time. Then, with a slow exhale, he opened his eyes and released a Longan-sized ball of golden threads. The ball hovered before his chest, spinning softly. Han Li flicked a finger, releasing an azure spell seal that sank into the ball. Thunder rumbled. The golden sphere trembled and released thin strands of golden lightning. Then, in a sudden flash, every trace of lightning vanished, replaced by a tiny orb of blue flames. Han Li opened his mouth and spit out an orb of his own blue fire. The two flames merged instantly, glowing fiercely before streaking back into his body. Without hesitation, he formed a complex incantation gesture and began refining the flame. The final strand of celestial ice flames was the key to fully mastering the Heaven Void Cauldron. With the cauldron under his control, he would have the power to move unhindered across the region. Half a month passed in silence. When Han Li finally opened his eyes, a flick of his finger summoned a smooth ball of blue flames. The fire twisted and spiraled before transforming into a slender snake. It wrapped itself around his finger, coiling tightly. Go, Han Li commanded. The flame snake unfurled a pair of blazing wings and shot toward the ceiling. It spiraled through the room gracefully, its movements both elegant and precise. Han Li watched silently, studying every shift and flicker. After the span of a cup of tea, he pointed at it. The flame snake burst apart in a quiet explosion, scattering blue sparks through the air. Each spark drifted back into Han Li's body, disappearing without a trace. A faint smile appeared on his face. The flames refine much quicker now. What once took half a year now takes only half a month. Satisfied, he reached into his storage pouch and summoned the Heaven Void Cauldron. The small, intricately carved treasure floated in the air before him. Han Li admired the craftsmanship for a moment before lifting his hands. A sphere of blue flame ignited above one palm. His other hand pressed over it, sending twin streams of ice fire merging into the growing sphere. The fireball swelled to the size of a human head, pulsing violently yet giving off no heat. Then, with a mental command, Han Li sent the fireball crashing into the cauldron. Instead of melting or cracking, the cauldron merged with the flames, wrapped in raging blue fire. It began to spin slowly. Han Li released his spiritual sense, probing into the cauldron, searching for any sign of change, any shift in resonance or structure. Time crawled by. His frown deepened. Even completely enveloped in refined celestial ice flames, the cauldron showed no reaction. Han Li lowered his head in thought before suddenly raising it to stare at the heaven void once more. His eyes shined with blue light as he channeled the entirety of his spiritual sense into his eyes. Not long after Han Li activated the bright sight spirit eyes, his expression began to stir as if having discovered something. He raised his finger to the heaven void cauldron and released several thin threads of azure spiritual energy that soon disappeared from sight. The moment they vanished, the ice flames around the cauldron began to surge violently. The tiny cauldron, no wider than a man's hand, suddenly expanded, growing until it spanned nearly 3 meters across. Its previously faint surface became clear and vivid, revealing carvings of mountains, flowing rivers, beasts, birds, and countless gentle scenes of nature that seemed to glow with a faint, dreamlike light. Han Li slowly rose to his feet, remaining calm despite the cauldron's sudden transformation. With a light gesture of his hand, the massive cauldron drifted toward him, stopping just an arm's length away. He studied the carvings closely, noting how the details shifted subtly, as if alive under the flickering blue light. Then, without hesitation, he thrust his hand directly through the surrounding ice flames. They parted harmlessly around his arm, gathering into a powerful swirl before rising into a spiraling tornado wrapped tightly around the cauldron. A low rumble echoed through the chamber. In the heart of the ice flame vortex, a new shape began to form, long, sinuous, and brimming with ancient power. A 3-meter-long flood dragon composed entirely of pure blue flame burst forth, its body coiling playfully around the cauldron as it released a series of excited dragon cries. Han Li watched this spectacle without surprise. A heartbeat later, the creature plunged straight into the cauldron's body and vanished. Instantly, the copper-brown surface of the cauldron shifted to a deep blue hue. The carved animals adorning it glittered with light and began to move, as if animated by an unseen force. Deer bounded over riverbanks, cranes took flight, and spirit beasts chased one another along the curved surface. Han Li did not waste time marveling at it. He pressed both palms forward, and countless fine threads of azure energy shot from his hands into the cauldron one after another. The cauldron absorbed them greedily. As his spiritual power poured in, a deep humming sound trembled through the room. Soon, ghostly blue characters, ancient and unfamiliar, began drifting across the surface of the cauldron. One by one, they floated upward, swirling together until they assembled 3 meters above the cauldron into a complete scripture outlined in pale blue light. Han Li tilted his head upward, staring intently at the suspended scripture. The moment he paused, even slightly, the blue light dimmed, scattering as if about to vanish entirely. Alarmed, he quickly resumed sending spiritual energy into the cauldron, and the characters brightened once more, stabilizing. The scripture was not long, barely 1,000 characters, but each character pulsed with profound meaning. When Han Li finished reading it, his expression shifted between surprise and disappointment. The scripture described the method to control the heaven void cauldron. It explained that the cauldron was a divine spirit treasure, a type of treasure vastly more sophisticated than common ancient items. Divine spirit treasures required both the refinement of a unique flame, in this case, the celestial ice flames, and a special technique known as the artifact imprint technique. The scripture continued to explain the nature of these imprint techniques. Every divine spirit treasure from antiquity possessed its own exclusive imprint method, entirely incompatible with any other treasure. Only by cultivating the correct imprint technique could a cultivator store a divine spirit treasure within their body and slowly temper it, shaping the treasure's spiritual nature to match their own. Over time, its essence would harmonize with its owner, granting the ability to wield its full power. But there was a cost. A divine spirit treasure could not be controlled with spiritual sense alone. It placed immense strain on the user's mind, meaning it could not be used casually as one would use a personal magic treasure. Instead, it required preparation, timing, and great caution. In exchange, when properly unleashed, its power could overwhelm nearly any opponent. All of this initially pleased Han Li, but the joy faded when he discovered that the imprint technique consisted of 3 layers. The first layer required a mid-nascent soul cultivation level, the second needed late nascent soul, and the third layer, deity transformation stage. Han Li could only cultivate the first layer at present, meaning he would be able to use only a small fragment of the cauldron's true might. Whether that fragment would be more powerful than his aureate sword formation or purple apex flames remained unknown. But he had little confidence. With a quiet sigh, he withdrew his hand, and the scripture dissolved into the air. After a long moment of thought, Han Li swept his sleeve. The massive cauldron dissolved into a stream of azure light, shrinking rapidly until it was small enough to fit into his palm once more. He tucked it into his storage pouch and sat down cross-legged. Closing his eyes, he began studying the first layer of the artifact imprint technique, letting its structure and subtleties sink deep into his mind. A month passed. By then, Han Li fully comprehended the first layer and successfully stored the Heaven Void Cauldron within his body. But the scripture had not revealed how long tempering the treasure would take, only that continual spiritual sense contact over time would gradually alter the cauldron's spiritual nature. After mastering the technique, Han Li turned his focus to creating a nascent soul-grade puppet using the rare materials provided by senior martial brother Cheng. Alongside the remains salvaged from Heaven Void Hall, with enough ingredients to attempt 4 puppets, he succeeded in forging only 1. The difficulty disappointed him, though he understood that such constructs were typically extremely demanding. As for the puppet body needed by Monarch Soul Divergence, it would require even rarer materials and pose an even lower success rate. Fortunately, Monarch Soul Divergence confidently assured him that failure was impossible due to the refinement method being his own creation. Relieved, Han Li accepted his explanation. When he finally left seclusion, Han Li first visited the sealed chamber containing Nangong Wan. The ancient fire toad's core was indeed weakening the soul seal curse. Though not as effectively as he had hoped, still, it granted him precious time. He then returned to his cave residence and spent several days refining medicine pills to aid mu peeling in reaching the core formation stage. Afterward, he bid farewell to senior martial brother Cheng and Lu Luo before setting out for the 7 Spirit Islands to meet Master Sunreach. Flying north across the vast lands, Han Li reached the shores of the Endless Sea after a week of unhurried travel. Even before he saw the 7 Spirit Islands, he felt the ocean's energy had changed dramatically. The once murky waters now shimmered faintly with blue, and small creatures he had never sensed here before filled the shallows. The savage sea beasts that once dominated these waters had vanished entirely. Most striking of all was the immense spiritual energy swirling somewhere in the distance. Following this disturbance, Han Li sped forward. Soon, faint shapes appeared on the horizon. He saw 7 separate fluctuations, each belonging to one of the 7 Spirit Islands, and a small group of cultivators stationed before them. The group consisted of 5 Foundation Establishment cultivators and a single core formation woman dressed in elaborate palace robes. Han Li approached openly, his presence impossible to conceal. The cultivators straightened nervously as he neared. The woman bowed deeply and addressed him with respectful caution. "Greetings, Senior. I am a disciple of the Harmonious Bond sect. I have been ordered to block entry to this region of the sea. May I ask your purpose for coming here?" Han Li muttered under his breath. "Block off?" So fellow Taoist Sunreach was correct. There is truly a problem. Recognition sparked in the woman's eyes. "Are you, Senior Han of the Drifting Cloud sect?" "That's right, I'm Han Li. Master Sunreach had invited here. Will you have to make a report before I can enter?" When the group of cultivators heard Han Li's name, they were thrown into turmoil. As of current, Han Li's reputation has reached a stage of fame that was known to the entire cultivation world of the Heavenly South. In their alarm, the group of cultivators revealed expressions of awe. They had clearly heard of his strength, his accomplishments, and the terrifying events surrounding Devilfall Valley. None of them dared show even the slightest disrespect. The woman in palace robes, acting as the leader of the group, immediately stepped forward with a tone filled with caution and sincerity. She explained that since he was Senior Han, there was no need for any formal report. Senior Sunreach himself had already ordered that Han Li be allowed to pass through without delay. She would personally escort him to Spirit Turtle Island. Han Li accepted this quietly, his expression calm and unreadable, and followed after her. Together, the two of them rose into the sky, flying toward a distant black speck on the horizon. an island that stretched over several dozen kilometers. As they approached, the woman politely explained the local geography. Knowing he was visiting these islands for the first time, she gestured toward a landmass far ahead and said that it was Spirit Phoenix Island, the headquarters of the Harmonious Bond sect. Nearby lay Spirit Turtle Island, the base of the Great Truth sect. While Han Li could not yet clearly see these islands, he could already sense something astonishing. In another direction, a massive concentration of spiritual energy pulsed like a living ocean of power. This overwhelming disturbance had to be the whirlpool that Sunreach had spoken about, the one that had shaken the entire region. Han Li silently pondered as he continued following the woman across the sky. After nearly 2 hours of flight, Spirit Turtle Island finally came into view. It was even larger than Spirit Phoenix Island and indeed shaped like an enormous turtle rising from the sea. The moment they drew near, the woman released a voice transmission talisman. In response, a streak of white light rose from the island to greet them. Han Li recognized the aura immediately. He stopped mid-air and sent out his own voice transmission, remarking with a faint smile that Master Sunreach was truly showing him great courtesy by welcoming him personally. Sunreach's hearty laugh answered him almost instantly. He happily declared that Han Li was known for keeping his promises, so it was only proper that he be greeted in person. Soon, the streak of white light faded, revealing the familiar figure of the Taoist priest. Han Li offered him a respectful salute, and the two exchanged a few cordial words. Sunreach dismissed the escorting woman and invited Han Li to accompany him to his cave residence, adding that fellow Taoist Wei had already been informed and would arrive soon. Devil Concord, however, was said to be occupied and unable to come. Han Li simply nodded, and the two of them flew together toward a remote mountain. As they traveled, Han Li allowed his spiritual sense to sweep across the island. What he discovered caused him to subtly frown. Spirit Turtle Island contained an incredibly dense environment of spiritual energy, saturating many kilometers of land. Yet, surprisingly, only a few cultivators resided here, and all of them carried cultivation far above the lower ranks. There were no ordinary disciples, which was unusual for a sect base of this size. The situation hinted that something was severely out of balance. Before long, Han Li followed Sunreach through a narrow entrance carved into a stone mountain. The interior was neat, spacious, and freshly constructed, as though prepared specifically for urgent matters. They entered a wide hall and took their seats. Sunreach poured tea for his guest, but instead of speaking about the issue at hand, he began casually describing the current situation of the endless seas, the various factions residing on the 7 Spirit Islands, and the unaffiliated cultivators that roamed nearby. Han Li quickly realized the old Taoist was deliberately avoiding the true reason for his summons. Although displeased, Han Li maintained his composure, responding politely as they made small talk. After enough time passed for a meal to be eaten, Wei Wuya finally arrived. Sunreach personally went outside to greet him. When they entered the hall together, Han Li greeted Wei Wuya with a formal nod. To Han Li's surprise, Wei Wuya appeared much healthier than expected. His complexion was radiant, his skin unblemished, and his vitality seemed completely restored. This was unexpected, considering how grievously he had been injured during the ordeal at Devilfall Valley. His rapid recovery implied the use of rare and precious healing resources. Once Wei Wuya sat down, he immediately asked whether Sunreach had already spoken with Han Li about the pressing matter. Sunreach replied that he had not, explaining that it was best to address such an important topic when all parties were present. He encouraged Wei Wuya to begin, offering to fill in the remaining details afterward. Wei Wuya agreed and wasted no time. With a grave voice, he declared that the danger they faced could no longer be postponed. If events continued unchecked, disaster would descend upon them all. Hearing the heavy word, disaster, Han Li's focus sharpened. Wei Wuya continued, revealing that the matter was directly related to the Elder Devil. That revelation shocked Han Li. He quickly asked whether the Elder Devil was not already severely wounded and forced to flee. Wei Wuya confirmed this but said that the timing of the massive whirlpool was far too suspicious to be coincidence. The whirlpool had formed shortly after the Elder Devil escaped. Even more concerning, Evidence surrounding it suggested that the devil had visited the area before the final battle. He went on to explain that several small sects and clans, those recently slaughtered by the Elder Devil, had all possessed devilish artifacts. The Elder Devil had seized 3 of them. Near the whirlpool, the cultivators discovered the shattered remnants of one of these artifacts, as though it had been destroyed by an overwhelming power. From this, they concluded that the Elder Devil must have reached the endless seas, interacted with the sealed formation there, and then fled once again. Han Li considered this and then asked what was truly wrong with the whirlpool. Noting that the cultivators would not be treating the matter with such seriousness unless the threat was extraordinary, Sunreach answered with a strained expression. He explained that the whirlpool was not merely a spiritual disturbance, it was the exposed core of a massive ancient spell formation. A formation that had been sealed countless ages ago. The 7 islands themselves were parts of its structure. Han Li's face hardened. The scale required for such a formation was unimaginable. Wei Wuya added that while they had not yet fully explored the deeper layers, they knew that the formation was intimately connected to the Elder Devil realm. He invited Sunreach to describe what he had personally witnessed. Sunreach revealed that at the very bottom of the whirlpool lay an immense, immeasurable sea of devilish energy. It was being forcibly suppressed by the enormous quantity of pure spiritual energy generated by the formation. However, now that the core of the formation had been damaged, this spiritual energy was leaking away. Eventually, when the suppression failed, the devilish energy would erupt. Wei Wuya continued with growing urgency. If the devilish energy escaped, it would corrupt at least half of the heavenly South continent. Spiritual environments would be ruined, and countless sects would be forced into warfare over the remaining uncontaminated land. The Drifting Cloud sect, being so close to the endless seas, would be one of the first affected. Han Li absorbed this in silence before finally speaking with a calm but stern tone. He stated that since the great cultivators had summoned him, they must already have a plan to deal with the situation. If they did not, then even he would be powerless before such a calamity. Sunreach assured him that they had indeed found a possible solution. Though it was astonishing, the key lay in ancient records connected to the Great Jin Empire. The name alone startled Han Li. Sunreach then asked if Han Li could guess where these records were discovered. A possibility flashed through Han Li's mind, and his expression shifted. It seems fellow Taoist Han guessed it. Master Sunreach wryly smiled. The information we acquired on this ancient sealing formation was found from secret ancient records that were hidden away in my sect countless years ago. My sect was originally a branch of one of the 3 great sects of the Great Jin, the Grand Truth sect. In addition, we were sent to the Heavenly South in order to watch over the ancient sealing formation. Your sect originated from the Great Jin? Han Li couldn't help but ask in surprise. That's right, Master Sunreach sighed. However, this was something that had occurred countless years ago. With that revelation, Han Li grew thoughtful, sensing that the matter was far more complicated than he had originally assumed. Master Sunreach continued explaining that although their sect's roots lay in the distant Great Jin, very little of the old heritage remained. Only a few ancient cultivation arts had survived, and even those were fragments passed down through the ages. The truth had only resurfaced because, while searching their hidden archives, he had stumbled upon a long-buried record, one that unexpectedly tied their present crisis to their forgotten origins. Han Li immediately focused on the real issue. He calmly asked whether the ancient record spoke of the immense sealing formation beneath the sea or offered any method to eliminate the calamity hidden under it. Master Sunreach's face turned solemn. The record did emphasize that the seal was vitally important and that guarding it was an eternal duty of their sect. But frustratingly, it contained no specific instructions on how the seal had been built. What it did provide, however, was a partial description of the formation's structure. Using that clue, they had gathered a small team of spell formation masters and spent several years decoding its secrets until they eventually found a possible method to restore the seal. Wei Wuya then stepped in, explaining the true difficulty. The restoration required not only many high-grade cultivators acting together, but also required one person to personally enter the depths where thick waves of corrupt devilish energy surged endlessly. Someone would need to carry the key formation plate deep into that suffocating miasma. And among all cultivators in the heavenly south, Han Li was the only one whose divine Devilbane lightning could resist such corruption long enough to make the mission possible. Hearing this, Han Li frowned slightly. He understood the gravity of what they were asking. After a moment of quiet thought, he asked how they had planned to execute this task before he returned. Clearly, they must have had a backup plan. Wei Wuya and Master Sunreach exchanged awkward glances, revealing that Han Li had easily seen through them. Master Sunreach admitted that they had originally chosen a cultivator who practiced powerful evil warding techniques and equipped him with many devil warding treasures. They had hoped this person could withstand the devilish energy long enough to place the formation plate. But when he tested the depths, the devilish energy proved overwhelmingly fierce. The risk was too high, less than a half chance of success. Only Han Li's lightning ability could guarantee real results. Han Li finally nodded in understanding, then replied that although he agreed the task was indeed best suited for his abilities, he would not recklessly charge into a situation he did not fully understand. He wanted to personally examine the scale and intensity of the devilish energy before committing himself. Master Sunreach approved immediately. The calamity beneath the sea had to be handled as soon as possible. So it was best for Han Li to inspect the danger with his own eyes. Wei Wuya agreed as well. Feeling reassured that they were acting transparently, Han Li followed them out of the cave residence. The three flew westward, racing across the sea until they arrived at an area covered in thick white mist. Above that mist swirled a vast cloud of rainbow light, shaped like an inverted whirlpool in the sky. The two phenomena were subtly connected, pulsing in unison like a single living structure. When Han Li observed them, astonishment flashed across his face. His spiritual sense detected immense quantities of pure spiritual energy within both the mist and the rainbow light, far more than even the greatest spirit veins could naturally produce. Upon seeing his reaction, Master Sunreach pointed toward a reef in the distance. A black-robed man sat there, calm and unmoving. This was Devil Concord, the top figure of the Devil Dao. As Han Li extended his spiritual sense, Devil Concord immediately opened his cold, sharp eyes and rose into the air. When Han Li and the others arrived, Master Sunreach greeted him cheerfully and announced Han Li's arrival, stating that the sealing formation could soon be restored. Devil Concord responded without warmth, acknowledging that Han Li's lightning ability was key to their plan, but he made no effort to hide his indifference. Han Li easily understood the reason behind the hostility. His divine Devilbane lightning was deadly against devilish energy and equally dangerous to anyone who cultivated devilish arts. For a figure like Devil Concord, whose entire strength came from such cultivation, Han Li represented a natural threat. Still, Han Li remained unfazed. His cultivation had already reached a point where even if Devil Concord attempted something reckless, he would not be helpless. But he did not believe Devil Concord would act foolishly under such circumstances. After hearing the explanation that Han Li wished to examine the devilish energy, Devil Concord gave a curt nod. Then, under the guidance of the three leaders, Han Li headed toward the giant whirlpool. Only moments later, the massive whirlpool came clearly into view. It was nearly a kilometer in diameter. But strangely, it did not churn seawater as ordinary whirlpools did. Instead, it released endless streams of pure white spiritual energy, rising like mist and glowing softly under the sun. The entire scene was beautiful and surreal, masking the deadly turmoil hidden beneath. As Han Li breathed the damp sea air, he marveled at the astonishing purity of the spiritual energy. He could only imagine how much spiritual force the whirlpool must have contained to release such quantities continuously for so many years. Curious, he moved closer. When he hovered directly above the center, an enormous pulling force seized him, threatening to drag him straight down. Startled, he instantly released azure light, stabilizing himself despite the immense pressure. Watching from a distance, Wei Wuya and Master Sunreach were stunned. They recalled that even powerful mid-stage nascent soul cultivators had struggled to stay aloft above the whirlpool. One elder had dropped over 30 meters before he regained control. Yet Han Li had steadied himself immediately. This confirmed their earlier suspicion. Han Li's cultivation was unusually deep, and his magic power was extraordinarily pure. After hovering for a moment, Han Li returned to the group. He calmly explained that the whirlpool was incredibly deep and the attraction power shockingly strong. He could not see the bottom clearly and had no way of knowing what dangers lurked below. Master Sunreach agreed, explaining that their spiritual sense could not penetrate deeply due to the vast distance and the overwhelming concentration of spiritual energy. To properly observe the devilish energy, they would have to descend into the whirlpool itself. He offered to accompany Han Li, adding that the path was filled with smaller whirlpools that were extremely dangerous if one were pulled into them. Relieved by the offer, Han Li gratefully accepted. In the next moment, the two men turned into streams of azure and white light, plunging into the depths of the giant whirlpool and disappearing from sight. Wei Wuya and Devil Concord remained above, silently watching the churning vortex. After a long stretch of quiet, Devil Concord finally spoke. He slowly turned to Wei Wuya and asked, "Brother Wei, what do you think about the drifting cloud sect's fellow Taoist Han?" Wei Wuya faintly smiled and slowly replied, "What do I think of him? What do you mean?" Devil Concord snorted and coldly said, "Why is fellow Taoist Wei asking when you already know the answer? Don't tell me you don't fear what he could become, since he's already entered mid-nascent soul stage at such a young age and possesses such mighty abilities. By the time he reaches late nascent soul stage, we will no longer have our current standing in the heavenly south." Wei Wuya's eyes flickered with a hint of amusement as he glanced at Devil Concord. "Hee, my point of view is a bit different from yours," he replied mysteriously. Devil Concord raised an eyebrow, his expression sharp. "So you're of a different opinion? Could it be that you have the confidence to suppress him once he reaches late nascent soul stage?" Wei Wuya shook his head slightly, smiling faintly. "Suppress? Why would I want to do that? I have already lived for over 100 years and my time will end in a century. Even if he were a reincarnation of a true immortal, he would not reach late nascent soul stage in that time. And even if he did and became the most powerful in the heavenly south, what concern is that of mine?" Devil Concord's eyes narrowed, a trace of disbelief crossing his face. "Brother Wei is willing to allow a single person to forcibly seize the power you spent so much effort attaining? If you were to ally with me, I might even make some concessions to you." "I am not interested," Wei Wuya said bluntly, still smiling. "Doesn't it feel a little late to make that offer now? If you had proposed this when he was at early nascent soul stage, I might have considered it. But now, his abilities are already on par with ours at the same stage. I have no desire to provoke a cultivator of equal strength, nor would I want to endanger my sect. You should remember that existences of our level are difficult to eliminate. Even with an ambush and assistance, it would not be enough. Only if you could create a formation similar to the one used against the Elder Devil would that change the equation." Wei Wuya's tone softened as he continued, "From where I stand, Brother Concord, you should refrain from underhanded actions and avoid angering him. He is a cultivator who could eventually unify the heavenly south. Do not forget the mighty deity transformation stage cultivators of the past who accomplished such feats. It is not something to be taken lightly." Devil Concord fell silent, sinking into thought. Meanwhile, Han Li and Master Sunreach were descending deeper into the whirlpool, delving some 10 kilometers below the surface. The spiritual energy pressure was so intense that they could not dive quickly. Han Li carefully deployed his blue light shield, covering his body in a protective layer of azure light, while over 30 golden streaks of light began to whirl rapidly around him, granting him extra support as he descended. Master Sunreach, in contrast, moved with incredible ease. A single white flying sword revolved around his body, cutting through the layers of dense spiritual energy like a blade through air. Han Li could not help but admire his companion's skill. Indeed, late nascent soul eccentrics were truly unique, and Sunreach's ease of movement only highlighted this. Using his spiritual sense, Han Li attempted to examine the surroundings, but he was repelled after spreading it just 40 meters below. His bright sight spirit eyes could see slightly further, about 100 meters down, yet all they revealed was a dense white mist. Occasionally, when hidden spiritual energy whirlpools appeared, Han Li's eyes would detect them in time, allowing him to maneuver with precision and avoid potential danger. Master Sunreach noticed Han Li's deft avoidance of these invisible whirlpools and felt increasingly impressed. Securing Han Li's allegiance was becoming even more desirable, although Sunreach did not concern himself with the possibility of Han Li unifying the Heavenly South. Observing Han Li's nature, he knew the young cultivator pursued the Heavenly Tao sincerely, showing no inclination for power or control beyond his personal cultivation. Even when Han Li had governed the state of Shi during his early nascent soul stage, he had revealed no hunger for dominion, much to Sunreach's relief. Hours passed as they continued their descent. Han Li estimated that he had now gone over 30 kilometers deep. Looking upward, the thick white mist separated him from the world above. The pressure against his flying swords was immense. But Han Li relied on his Azure Essence sword arts, which granted him deeper magic power than most mid-nascent soul cultivators, enabling him to maintain control. Fellow Taoist Han, we're about to reach the bottom. Be careful, Master Sunreach called out. Many thanks, Brother Sunreach, Han Li responded, steadying himself and gazing downward. A blinding white radiance emerged from below. Layers of light stacked upon each other. Han Li slowed his descent as he approached it, stopping about 20 meters above the dazzling barrier. Through his bright sight spirit eyes, he could detect countless threads of devilish chi writhing beneath the surface. He muttered, "So this is suppressing the devilish chi. It will prove quite troublesome." Master Sunreach explained that the sheer amount of devilish chi had formed an abyss, the depths of which were unknown. Sunreach admitted that even his own cultivation, with its inherent evil warding properties, allowed him to penetrate only 300 meters before being forced to retreat. The concentrated devilish energy could corrupt any common cultivator, while those versed in ancient devilish arts might experience a massive surge in cultivation but risked losing their soul entirely. Han Li nodded, absorbing the gravity of the situation. After a brief pause, he told Sunreach to wait as he would personally examine the devilish chi's intensity. Be careful, Brother Han, Sunreach warned, though he was not surprised. Han Li's figure blurred, and his foot briefly touched the white light barrier. A streak of azure sword chi shot downward, piercing the barrier and vanishing into the devilish chi. He realized the barrier only restrained devilish chi and required no extra effort to breach. Golden sword streaks began to hum and spark with arcs of lightning, forming a protective net around him. His hands shaped incantation gestures, compressing the net into a sphere enveloping his blue shield. The flying swords shrank under his command and were safely stored within his sleeve. He descended into the devilish chi. Thunder roared as black energy lashed out, yet the rings of lightning scattered it. Han Li remained still, observing how the divine devilbane lightning resisted the chaotic currents. The devilish chi continuously reformed and swarmed around him, consuming the lightning gradually. He frowned, considering the immense energy expenditure required. Han Li did not extend his spiritual sense past the light barrier. The concentrated devilish essence below could corrupt it entirely. His bright sight spirit eyes could only pierce 10 meters into the darkness. After reaching a depth of 600 meters, Han Li paused, observing the devilish chi carefully, and then swiftly returned to Sunreach. The divine devilbane lightning is truly powerful, Sunreach said with admiration. You remained inside for such a long time without damage. Its reputation is well earned. It was nothing, Han Li replied calmly. The devilish chi is uncontrolled and scattered, making it manageable. Let's return to discuss the plan above. Han Li withdrew his lightning net and summoned his flying sword, ascending swiftly. Upon surfacing, Wei Wuya asked, "How was it, with fellow Taoist Han's divine devilbane lightning? You should be free to move inside the devilish chi." Han Li responded thoughtfully, "I have tested it, but before I agree to proceed, I need to know the exact location where you wish to place the formation plate. If it is too deep, my divine devilbane lightning may not last long enough." Devil Concord then proposed, "Let us return to the cave residence to discuss the specific location. The formation plate is still in the hands of those formation masters. Let us first go retrieve the plate and then have the discussion then. After all, the formation plate wasn't easily created, so we cannot lose it in the process." In this episode, we saw Han Li facing one of the most formidable challenges of his journey so far. Over the course of this episode, He learned about the origins and hidden history of the Drifting Cloud sect, discovered the existence of the immense devilish chi beneath the giant whirlpool, and realized the magnitude of the task ahead in restoring the ancient sealing formation. He bravely ventured deep into the whirlpool, testing his divine Devilbane lightning against the overwhelming devilish chi, carefully observing its power and limitations. Along the way, we also witnessed the perspectives of the great cultivators Wei Wuya and Devil Concord, reflecting on Han Li's extraordinary potential and the possible future of the Heavenly South. Han Li's courage, intelligence, and unique abilities continue to set him apart, showing just how critical he is in facing the upcoming dangers and maintaining balance between the forces of devilish energy and the cultivators above. What happens next? Stay tuned for the next episode of Immortal's journey to immortality. If you enjoyed this episode or found it exciting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to get the latest updates on Han Li's journey. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.